Wooey! So I've heard a lot of negative things about a new HBO Max show, or excuse me, pardon, not HBO Max, Max. I don't want to be thrown in jail for using the wrong nomenclature there. I heard a lot of buzz about this new Max show called The Idol being a super stinker. The show's got like a 26% on Rotten Tomatoes and low scores across the board from pretty much anyone with eyeballs. And to me, it just didn't seem like an entertainingly bad show. I watched the trailer and it just looked like a snooze fest, and then I looked at the official poster and it just looks like the woman's wearing an actual orange rind for a dress. It looks CGI'd, so I thought the main complaint was going to be that it's low budget or poorly put together. But apparently that's not the case. So I read a few of the reviews and I watched a few reviews as well, and everything people were talking about actually did make it sound fun bad. So I decided to do what I love to do. I dove into the septic tank, fucking cannonballed into the deep end in order to swim around in the sewage, just to see if it was fun bad. And now ace reporter Charles is here on the front lines to give you the verdict after watching 2 episodes. It's sometimes fun bad, but mostly just bad. The reviews led me to believe that there was a menu here that was serving something entertaining. So I came into the restaurant and I ordered the poop, but I got served the pee. There is occasionally moments where I get what I was hoping to order, which is entertainingly bad moments and content, but 9 times out of 10 what I'm getting with the show, at least through the first 2 episodes, is just a big fucking plate of nothing. It's just boredom, empty calories. I'm gonna get into it deeply here in just a moment, but just to give you a little context for the production, it was apparently already plagued by controversy before the first episode even aired. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes drama and a lot of like really turbulent changes and a lot of shit going on. So a lot of people already wrote off the show and put it 6 feet under, put the tombstone on top of it before it even aired, just because of all of this drama that was happening behind the scenes. They thought there was no way that it would actually come out and be decent. But I'm not here to really talk about all of that stuff behind the scenes because I went into this show blind, not knowing any of it, and it's still bad. So let's dive in. Episode 1. Now, this is where I'm immediately talking about the show just being like eating fucking styrofoam where you get nothing out of it for a long time. For the first 40 minutes, unless you're really just like, auga, titties, there's not a whole lot of like interesting things happening. Now, I mention boobies here because within the first 5 minutes, they're immediately going into just showing you tits, and it even becomes a plot point. A plot point that they kind of harp on for a good chunk of screen time, actually, where the main character Jocelyn's doing a photo shoot, and then she just, derobes herself to show full bare breasts, and she just wants to let those honkers go bonkers, but there's an intimacy coordinator on set who's telling her she can't do that because it hasn't been approved by the intimacy board, the executive branch of booby coordinators. And they get mad at him for it, for trying to put the kibosh on that, because she wants to just let it all hang out. And he's saying, no, we really need approval. It's how these things go. And he's just doing his job. And he's being framed as a villain here. Like, the main character, Jocelyn's getting mad at him. Her staff is getting mad at him. Eventually, they just try and, like, scheme on how to get him out of the equation. So they lock him in a bathroom. So I just found that pretty interesting that its first major plot point, I suppose, is just titties. Like just underlined titties. How are we gonna get people hooked on our show? Obviously, the tried and true method. We're going fucking caveman brain. Show them the milkers. And that's the whole first part there, really. Like, that's actually the first instance of conflict or anything, really, exposition, which was an interesting idea, an interesting call to make. But yeah, like I said, if you're not just going into this for softcore porn reasons and like your eyes popping out of your sockets like a cartoon character when you see titties, I just really don't think there's a whole lot to get invested in within the first 40 minutes of episode 1. Now, to quickly blast you here with the cliff notes, episode 1 focuses mainly on our main character Jocelyn, who is a massive pop star, but has recently fallen on hard times due to some tragic events that have happened in her life. She's had some very tragic things happen, like the loss of her mother, and they keep mentioning that she had a psychotic breakdown at one point. And 2, she just recently had one of her pictures leak, and it's not a picture that you'd necessarily be hanging on your refrigerator. It's not exactly a good photo. It's a picture with cum on her face. So she got glazed, and the picture surfaced online through a leak, and it became the #1 talked about thing in the world, so people are making fun of her, and everyone's talking about, Jocelyn, the mega pop star, all cummy-faced now. So now she's tackling that stress on top of the stress she's already experiencing through everything she's been through. And she now has a single coming out for the first time in a year, and she's not super proud of it. Everyone's encouraging her that it's an amazing song, but she herself is a little on the fence about the real quality of it. That's kind of the first half in a nutshell. They were also playing a little game of keep away with Jocelyn's phone, so that way she wouldn't see the cum face picture and find out that it leaked and she's been trending online all day. And eventually she does find out, they do tell her, and she takes it like a champ. She says, it could be worse. And she's not wrong, it could have been worse. That could have been like a full-blown goatsy situation, right? So she takes it on the chin, and then right after that decides that she wants to go to a club. So her and her friends go to a club where she meets The Weeknd, Tedros. So Tedros is the owner of the club that she attends, and as he's, playing music, he calls her out. He's like, holy shit, that's Jocelyn! We've got to dance. So they dance, and then immediately fall in love, basically. They start grinding, and they go to a stairwell where they're about to do a little canoodling, but then one of Jocelyn's friends, who's also her assistant, it kind of kills the mood, but they still got close. They exchanged contact information like it was a goddamn car accident, and they go their separate ways. The following night, Jocelyn is talking to her best friend / assistant, and says that she wants to bring Tedros over. And so she does. And now finally, after 45 grueling minutes, we get to the part where it gets fun bad, entertainingly stinky. We spent 45 minutes on the fucking Oregon Trail here going through all kinds of, unpleasantries, and now we're finally to a point where we can put a smile on our face. Before going into it, I would like to say that I'm actually surprised now, after watching the first 45 minutes, at how low the ratings are for it. Even though I found it uninteresting, I didn't find it to be like the most horrible show ever, like a lot of the reviews would have you believe. The cinematography is actually pretty good. It's shot well. Like, the show is well made. The biggest problem with the show is that it's uninteresting, and it's focusing on the worst parts of its narrative. It's focusing on the most unlikable parts of what the show is crafting. So it's putting all of the focus in the wrong areas, which I imagine most people are just tuning out for. So they just don't have any investment in it, and it makes it hard to actually care about what's going on. But as a show, I don't even think it's that horrible, like as bad as the reviews are making it seem. It's just fucking boring. That's by far its biggest sin for the first 45 minutes. But now, we get to Tedros coming into the equation. So he shows up to her house, and I can't show you the clip, but I will show you a screenshot. Tedros walks up to this house like he's the goddamn Terminator. Look at the atmosphere here. It's like a scene out of Courage the Cowardly Dog. Like, this shit is like when SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs went to the cemetery to get the #1 drink hat. Like, it is haunting. I don't know why he shows up like this. He's got a fucking trench coat on. He's like an assassin out of John Wick. Like, it is wild that he rolls up like this. And he goes into the house, too, with this same energy. Now, I had to take that picture with my phone because on Netflix you can't do, like, a screen cap. Or at least, I don't know how, I'm too fucking stupid, I guess. But basically, the doors swing open, and they're really, like, squeaky doors, like something out of a horror movie. And he's like the fucking Undertaker. He just, like, slowly walks up. And he continues that persona, like this haunting presence, even once he gets to the house. It is so weird. So much so that the assistant, Jocelyn's assistant, is like, oh, this guy's got weird vibes. So she's clearly like a little perturbed by it as well. And he just keeps it going. It's like a 5 or 6 minute scene of him rolling up and going into the house where he's like creepily playing the piano while looking at Jocelyn's assistant like dead in the eyes, staring a hole through her fucking soul. And then he pours himself a drink, and then he's like checking his teeth in the mirror, licking himself, playing around with his trench coat, and then he starts sniffing her pillows, just actually taking a huge huff of the fumes from her pillows. It's so goofy, like beautifully goofy. Now, while he's doing all of this, Jocelyn's getting ready because she's very excited to have sex with him. And then she goes, meets him, and then wants to show Tedros her song. She wants an honest opinion and says that he's enough of an asshole to be honest with her. So she plays the song for him, and he says he likes it, but he doesn't believe her. To which she's like, what do you mean? That doesn't make sense. What do you mean you don't believe me? He says he doesn't believe that she knows how to fuck. So we're getting very 50 Shades of Grey here. That gave me the same tingles as the 50 Shades of Grey movie when Christian says, I don't make love, I fuck. It's so skin-crawlingly cringe. So he's like, I don't believe you know how to fuck. And she's like, I know how to fuck. And then he like takes her robe off, and I shit you not, wraps the robe around her head and then ties it around her neck. So it's like a manhunt fatality. So he's got the robe over like a paper bag that he's trying to like strangle her with, basically. And then he gets out a knife and he's like, don't panic, I know you heard the knife. And then he's like, open your mouth. And then he cuts a hole for her mouth so she can breathe. It's so fucking silly. And then the episode concludes with, after cutting the hole in the mouth, he says, now you can sing. It's super silly, and I neglected to mention a very important point with an ice cube that happens right before Tedros puts the robe over her head like he's about to waterboard her. He takes an ice cube, and he like runs it down her leg and onto her like pussy and all that. And that ice cube is actually a major supporting character, believe it or not. Well, not like that single ice cube, it melted, God rest its soul, rest in peace. But ice cubes in general. Because she became so inspired by that sexual experience in the ice cubes that it kind of become her vessel to tap into her more creative side. So the single she's releasing is about sex. Like, it's about being a freak, getting real grimy. And when he said that he didn't believe her in the song because her vocals didn't convey that she knew how to be a freak and have sex, the ice cube brings out that freak side of her, I guess. In the next episode, she does a remix of that song because she said, you know what, the previous one wasn't me, this one's more me, and she plays it for her whole team to get their opinions. And the song just actually sounds like porn. Like, the entire intro is just moaning and deep breathing and shit like that. It sounds like you just walked in on somebody in the masturbatorium going crazy. So her staff wasn't super thrilled because it just sounds like they're listening to porn. And she gets so upset that she goes back to try and remix it. And in order to get back in the zone of being a sexual expert, she has a glass of ice cubes nearby that she keeps taking from and rubbing on her vagina and then like squeezing at her neck in order to get back into that moaning sexual zone, which I thought was so silly. Like that made me giggle a lot. So this is when the show's at its best in terms of like entertainingly fun bad shit. Like having to kegel some ice cubes in order to do enough deep breathing on your track in order for it to sound sexually stimulating enough. What a brilliant idea. Now, episode 2 reveals like the deeper plot elements here. Tedros was already kind of framed as someone who's probably going to be a bit shady in the grand scheme of things, and episode 2 drives it home. It turns out Tedros has a label of his own, and pretty much everyone from that club is in on it, and it seems it's leading audience to believe that Tedros is getting close to Jocelyn for his own selfish gain as well as the gain of his label. So big plot twist moment was one of Jocelyn's dancers, whom is also one of her friends, is part of Tedros's friend group, and they actively fuck, and this whole thing was actually a setup. So that's episode 2. Tedros gets even closer to Jocelyn and eventually floats the idea of moving into her house, which she's all on board with. Meanwhile, Jocelyn's best friend is getting a little fishy once she learns that Tedros owns this label. She's starting to connect dots that this might not exactly be the most trustworthy person. Now, that's all of the plot shit. It kind of interesting, I will say. Like, I think that's an interesting narrative play. However, once again, I think they just focus on the most boring parts in the episode. But this one had a lot of fun bad moments, at least sporadically placed throughout. It feels like this show wants to be 50 Shades of Grey, like great value version, like diet 50 Shades of Grey. So it has these really weird moments, like genuinely just like baffling moments where Tedros and Jocelyn are about to fuck. And she's like, put that bathrobe over me again, or put the robe over my face again. So he like blindfolds her with the bathrobe thing. And then she starts like getting ready to fuck, but then Tedros goes behind a chair and he just starts instructing her like a drill sergeant. And it goes on for like 3 or 4 minutes, probably more than that, probably closer to like 5 or 6 minutes of him just giving her orders for things to do. So he's like, show me those titties. and now move the titties around. And then I shit you not, he even says, imagine my cock in your throat, and now you're choking on it. And now you're spreading your little pussy. It's so weird. So the Weeknd, Tedros keeps saying these things to her, and she's like mimicking it in front of him like it's a stage play. And it just goes on for so long. And then one of his friends that he brought over is watching in the mirror, and she starts doing the same thing. So Tedros is like a fucking sexual savant shaman. Like, he's like fucking mind controlling women around him just by existing. So yeah, that's some good, goofy, fun, bad shit. There's also a scene where like Tedros is instructing one of his friends how to fuck. So he has like a shock collar on his dick, and he's like, "All right, now you need to look like you're ready to fuck that girl." And he's like, "No, not good enough." Shocks him. He's like, "Ah!" Like he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll get more into it." And he's like, "No, not good enough." And then says, "Remember, you're not a human, you're a star." And then fucking shocks his wiener again. So the episode gets fucking crazy. Like, it's going hog wild here. But it's all on the stuff that I don't think most people would care about here. Like, the softcore porn elements of it. I guess it's not even really softcore porn. It's just, like, straight up porn where they don't show you most of it. Actually, which is pretty much softcore. Yeah, it's just, like, all focused on, like, the sexual parts of it as opposed to the actual interesting narrative bits. Like, the whole setup plan, as well as Jocelyn's friend, who is now getting in a position where the label's losing trust in Jocelyn, but her friend, who is the dancer, can also sing. And it's looking like they're going to replace Jocelyn with her. And she is the one that's part of Tedros' friend group, so that will benefit Tedros and all of them. Like, there are interesting elements at play, but they don't actually get the spotlight. It's all on the, make your titties bounce for me. Yeah. Good titties bouncing. Good shit. And then spanking her ass and, like, jiggling her butt cheeks. Like, that's not very interesting. That's laughable. Now, there is another section of this episode that I actually thought was very interesting. It's Jocelyn's music video. She's doing a music video for the song, and it's not going well, which is why they're about to replace her with her friend. She just keeps doing the choreography over and over and over again, forcing them to restart. They're many hours over time, way out of schedule, because Jocelyn needs it to be perfect. She's still overcome with grief over the loss of her mother. This is the first music video she's done without her mother being there. And she's breaking down, she's crying, and she's going over the moves so many times that her legs are getting bloody, so they have to keep like fixing that with makeup. And it's actually conveyed in a pretty interesting way. The cinematography is good. Like, it is actually good. And then eventually she gets the perfect take. Everything was like fantastic, exactly what she wanted, but the camera was out of focus. So she had to do it again. And she didn't get it perfectly the 50th time around. So, like, it's actually a very interesting scene. Her staff coming in to try and lift her up, it's not working well. Her staff, you also start to wonder, do they even really care about Jocelyn, or are they just there because it benefits them? Like, all of that's actually kind of interesting, but it is not what the show seems to want to focus on, which I think is such a fucking misfire, and probably why so many people don't actually like the show. Because I don't think many people care to see softcore porn. Like, you just type boobies in on Google and you'll get a million fucking OnlyFans links, right? Like, you're probably not tuning into this to get porn. At least I don't think most people would be. But yeah, once again, the episode does end up being overwhelmingly boring for the most part and uninteresting. Because again, it is focusing on like the worst parts of what the show's offering. But yeah. Oh, another thing. The characters feel really stiff a lot in this episode, even more so than episode 1. Some of these characters that come in here feel like actually phoned in performances. They didn't really care that much, which is kind of odd. I mean, especially for a show of this budget and this prestige. I mean, it's a fucking HBO Max show. So I would think that they'd really make sure all of the acting is fantastic, but there's a lot of times in here where I was like, damn, that just really didn't seem like they cared at all about this whole scene. But anyway, I just thought I'd point that out. It's only 2 episodes. Maybe it really gets better. You know, it really finds its footing in episode 3. I couldn't tell you, but I just wanted to at least give you all an update since I did watch it. And overall, I do think it was a waste of time. Like, I don't think the fun bad moments outweighed the overwhelming boredom or disinterest I had in the show. There's just very few fun, shitty moments that are sprinkled throughout the 2 episodes, and that just really wasn't worth it. So, yeah, that's really about it. So, yeah. All of you know I have a very real passion for bad movies, games, and TV shows. I always like to give them a chance because there's a beautiful sweet spot, this nirvana that exists in horrible media where something is so bad that it becomes extremely entertaining. It's a delicate balancing act between boring, bad, and just irredeemable waste of time, and super stinker that puts a big smile on your face. And sometimes there's shows or movies that fucking tap dance on that line, that line of lunacy. And The Idol is one of those shows. I already made a video covering the first 2 episodes of this show, but long story short, you'd have more fun experiencing hemorrhoids than you would watching this one. However, I think there are tiny little glimmers of hope that it can be fun bad at times. And that's mainly because of The Weeknd. Within the first 2 episodes, The Weeknd establishes himself as one of the most unintentionally comedic characters to ever grace the television screen. He plays a goofball named Tedros, and he's basically a cult leader and a sexual savant shaman. Basically, everything he does is hypnotic to the point where everyone wants to have sex with him, and he can have sex with anyone and everyone all the time. And this leads to probably one of my favorite scenes in recent memory from a show, where he's got the main character, Lily Rose Depp. She plays a pop star named Jocelyn. He's got her ready to engage in a little bedroom ham sandwich activities here, a little coitus, and he blindfolds her and tells her to get on the bed, and he starts barking orders at her like a drill sergeant from behind a chair. So he gets behind a chair and he pokes his head out and starts basically having phone sex with her in person. He's like, "Yeah, now imagine my tongue on your pussy. Yeah, my wet tongue's on your pussy right now. And here comes my cock. Open wide for the airplane, that's my cock. Whoop, you're choking on it." And the whole scene, that's the whole scene basically. He just keeps saying this and it goes for 5 or 6 minutes and he's sitting on the fireplace, poking out behind the chair. And then he delivers what I consider to be one of the most powerful lines in all of recorded history. He says, "Fucking stretch that tiny little pussy," as the camera zooms in on his face like we're about to enter the Twilight Zone here or something. And he delivers it like an android that's malfunctioning. It's so beautiful. But anyway, there are moments like that sprinkled out throughout the show. But on the whole, it's actually just a pretty revolting show that's clearly just there because the director's got an actual fetish that he wants to be paid to produce, I guess. It doesn't really have a legitimate message. Jocelyn, the main character, does have an interesting story to tell, but he's not interested in telling that story. Instead, it's only focused on the sexuality of everything and everyone in the show, as opposed to being an interesting piece about the exploitation of pop stars or something in the industry. It doesn't have any kind of criticism or critique of it. Instead, it's perfectly content just showcasing exploitation of a pop star for the sake of I don't know, softcore porn. It's not delivering any kind of real message. The show doesn't really have anything it wants to say. It's literally just a montage of sex scenes, while giving you tiny little breadcrumbs of what could have been an interesting premise if they just decided to actually focus on telling a good story. At some point, maybe they were, and then they just decided, nah, good stories are for dweebs, here's more tits, and that's the direction they went, because that's pretty much the final product of the show so far. Episode 4 just dropped. I've watched every episode. It's only a 5-episode long series, so it's a pretty low time investment, so I plan on finishing it. And I was going to wait till episode 5 dropped, but I can't hold my little wet tongue anymore here. I've got to talk about episodes 3 and 4, so I went over episode 3 on stream, and I just watched episode 4, so I'll show you the clips from episode 3 that I talked about, and then get into 4. What's The Idol about? It's literally... The show has one interesting character, and that's Lily Rose Depp's character. But for some reason, they refuse to focus on her. It's mainly The Weeknd being a fucking weirdo. Yeah, spread that tight little pussy for me. Yeah, now my cock's in your mouth. Well, you're choking on it. Yeah, now you're choking on it. That's half of the fucking show. And for some reason, the director very openly just has the show as just fetish material for himself. There is not a single goddamn scene in that show where Lily Rose Depp does not have her titties out. Even when she's in public, she still is wearing basically a see-through top with no bra. Even in public in the show. There is no scene in that entire show where Lily Rose Depp has her tits covered. It is actually just softcore porn that the director made, and The Weeknd is a creepy weirdo in. There's just nothing to it. Exhibit Shane. Alright, I'll get into it real quick. I was going to do another video on the Idol, but I'm just going to wait till it's done. Episode 3 got so fucking unhinged. So, spoilers, I don't think anyone gives a fuck. No one's really watching the show. I don't think anyone cares. The Idol episode 3. It's once again just fetish material for the director to jerk off to. But at the very end, they're having like this dinner. And The Weeknd's there with his whole crew. Lily Rose Depp is there with a couple of her friends. And one of Lily Rose Depp's friends pitches that she should make a picture with cum on her face, her album cover. Which is like, oh, that's goofy. And she's like, no, I kind of want to be taken seriously. And he's like, why? Just use this picture of cum on your face for your album cover. It's provocative. You'll be a real bad girl. This is good for us. This is good for everybody. And she's like, no, I really want to be taken seriously. So then The Weeknd's like, but why? And then he gets like really deep. I won't bore you with most of the details. Eventually it culminates with her revealing that her mother, who has died, was abusive and used to beat her with a hairbrush to keep her in line and to keep her making hit songs. And she's in a bit of like a creative rut. So The Weeknd's like, so do you think your mom beating you with that hairbrush led to your great art? And she's like, yeah, I think in some way. And she's fucking crying her eyes out now. And he's like, do you think it was worth it because the songs were so good? And she's like, yeah, well, I guess. So then he goes, I shit you not, do you still have that hairbrush? So she goes and gets the hairbrush. And the episode ends with him beating the fuck out of her with the hairbrush. She's crying and wailing. And then she eventually says thanks. It's diabolical. He turns the trauma into like a sexual fetish thing for himself and convinces her that it's good for her artistic process. And then she says thanks. It's fucking crazy. Was he beating her or was it sexual? Sexual for him, not so much for her. She was legitimately crying her fucking eyes out, screaming and wailing. Because he even says like, get ready, I'm going to hurt you. And then just starts beating her with the hairbrush, making her relive the childhood trauma that her mom put her through. But for him, it's like a sexual thing. It seems, because he's just a fucking weirdo. No, it's crazy. Someone put this in the chat, and I think this is an interesting talking point. Do you think that's some Illuminati shit and he's trying to tell people that's what they do? The whole message of the show, I believe at one point was supposed to be the mistreatment of idols in Hollywood and like these parasites that prey on them and fuck them up. Like, I think that's the talking point it wanted to deliver. But during production, they fired the original visionary behind it and The Weeknd took over. It wasn't just The Weeknd. They replaced her. They then went in a different direction. I think they said they didn't want it to be too much of a female perspective or something. I can't quite remember the quote. And they took that message and they turned it into here's just actual softcore porn and fetish shit and that's it. Because there's no deeper message so far. There isn't. He's a cult leader and it's literally only the sexual aspects of the cult and that's it. There's no bigger statements yet. It's actually just a softcore porn production that the director and The Weeknd have made for themselves to jerk off to. It's so weird. I don't know what they were thinking with it. But there are moments that are fun bad. Like I said in my first video about it, there are moments in that show that are fun bad. Everything The Weeknd says and does is unintentionally the most unhinged comedy ever. For example, in episode 3, he's picking out her clothes for her. He's supposed to be like controlling every aspect of her life because he's a manipulative cult leader, sex savant. He's picking out her clothes. And there's a guy one of the workers there is showing some clothes, and he's like, "This would look pretty good if you want to try this." The Weeknd goes up to him. He's like, "Look at her again. Fucking look at her again. Hey, fucking look at her again. I saw you. If you fucking look at her again, I'll drag your ass down Rodeo Drive and fucking curb stomp you. Look at her again." And like, that's his energy. But it doesn't work well because it's so over the top goofy. Like, absurdly goofy. These are the bits, Gus. How is his acting? So a lot of people criticize his acting. I will say it's not great, but it's not as bad as everyone's saying. I think he learned from like YouTuber acting tutorials because everything he does is so big. It's so over the top. This motherfucker wears a trench coat like the Undertaker. Like, everything he does is on the nose and grand. Like, he doesn't just deliver a line, he lives the line. So it's so campy. But I wouldn't even say that it's like bad acting. It's just so dramatic. All the time. Thanks, Resub Lost Kids. You forgot the jerk off scene. Oh yeah, and that same scene I was talking about where he's like, "Look at her again. Fucking look at her again." He eventually raw dogs her in the dressing room in front of everyone in the store, mind you. And then he's about to come and she's like, "No, don't come inside me. No, don't come inside me." So she like pulls up her panties and walks away, and he's like, "Now what?" She's like, "You'll figure it out." So then he jerks himself off and he's like, "Oh! Oh! Ah!" in the dressing room as he's like coming. Thanks, the reset bet. I don't know why The Weeknd even agreed to do this, man. This is like a reputational ruiner. It's so cringe. Maybe pseudo. Interesting idea, though. You forgot him eating her out in the backseat. That's just more of what I was saying, like it's all just a fetish for the director. On the way to the store in a convertible, The Weeknd is just eating out Lily Rose Depp in the backseat. And then, like, in front of paparazzi. Well, no, he finishes eating her out once the paparazzi gets there, that he called. It's so fucking weird. It's so weird. It's so stupid. He probably just sees it as his way into acting. I mean, this is a big show, or it was hyped up to be a big show. It's flopping because it's not very good. But I have no doubt that he really thought this was his acting break. Like, this was his big ticket into acting. Thanks to the gift sub cannon. I feel bad for Lily Rose Depp. I don't know who convinced her to take this role, but I really think they just killed her whole career with this one. I don't know how you bounce back from this one. The Weeknd still got music to fall back on. She's got just acting. And this is a huge blemish. The show is also littered with his music to talk about jerking himself off. Oh yeah, by the way, after he beats her with the hairbrush to relive her childhood trauma that her mom inflicted on her, the episode ends with a Weeknd song playing. It's so goofy. It's so fucking tragic. Yeah, he plays his own music throughout the entire show. Ugh. Yeah, episode 4, it didn't come out yet, did it? I can't remember. Let me check. Yeah, episode 4 came out this Sunday, and episode 5's next Sunday. I haven't seen episode 4 yet. Probably end up watching that tomorrow or Friday. I saw a clip from it, though. I already know what to expect. I already knew this was coming. She made a remix to one of the songs, well, her only new song in the show. And since she was, like, in love with The Weeknd, she starts rubbing an ice cube on her pussy and shit, and then she's, like, moaning into the mic to try and make it really sexual. So I saw a clip from episode 4 where in order to replicate that in the studio, she just has The Weeknd basically fucking her in there so she's moaning on the track. Or something like that, I'm pretty sure. It's fucking nuts. Show's crazy. In, like, the weirdest way. That's not true. I saw the clip on Twitter. What do you mean? It's him like rubbing up and grinding on her and like dry humping her while she's going on the track. You're absolutely lying. She didn't do that. Is that clip not real? You know what? Here, I'm gonna scrub through it just to prove you wrong real quick. Or prove them wrong, I guess. Let's see. Because that is the song in the, I'm looking at it right now. I am literally watching it right now. Why are you telling me it's wrong? I am literally watching this happen. He is grinding on her. He is currently grabbing her ass. Now he's dry thrusting a little bit. What are you talking about? I am literally watching it. Like, it's not like he's like raw dogging or anything. Yeah, no, that was the scene. I'm watching it again. This wait, why is there more scenes of this? They're doing it again. This one's much more egregious. Now he's fingering her as she's singing the track. What the fuck are you talking? Why are you telling me I'm wrong? I'm literally watching it. Oh my god. This is so much worse than the first Twitter clip. She's also blindfolded, by the way. Like it's a game of pin the tail on the donkey. And not only that, not only is this for the track, she is singing it in front of all of her friends and people that she considers family. Now he's grabbing her titty. Like through the dress. In front of the record label, who's all getting uncomfortable. I can't believe you were telling me I'm wrong. I am actually watching this now. It is always so shameful. You just come in here and fucking tell lies. Now you made me have to go and spoil this for myself. Now I won't get to experience that for the first time again. Which one of you said that? What was your name again? You just ruined that for me now. So the first half of episode 4 is dedicated to the artistic process of creating the hits with Jocelyn. So Tedros is getting her in the mood. So he's got like a producer there that's helping record everything, and she's performing in front of the entire house now, which includes Tedros' like family as well as like other people in the industry, as well as Jocelyn's manager is there now to observe because now they're a little concerned about Tedros because he's a criminal. So her manager is there basically reporting on everything and making sure that they can, you know, fight back against Tedros at some point. Now, they spend, like I said, the first half making these songs together, and since the idol can't go a second without being absolutely absurdly in-your-face sexual, like to the point where it's now cartoonish, he blindfolds her while she's recording, and then starts fingering her while squeezing her titty, like actually honking on her milkers. He's just like, honk, honk, and he's like fucking slapping around her clitoris. He's actually working her vagina, like he's trying to like beat an egg or something. So he's down there doing this, and she's going ah on the track, and he's like, brilliant, this is amazing, save it, mark it, good. That's like the whole first half is making those songs together like that, and also the manager reporting back like Tedros is dangerous, and everyone in the house is like kind of odd. Eventually Tedros then like kidnaps and ties up one of Jocelyn's friends, Xander, who is also now living in the house. They go way back. Xander was aware of like the abuse that her mother put her through, and Tedros thinks that he's a big, untrustworthy liar, so he fucking actually like hog ties this guy and then puts a shock collar on him, and then Jocelyn and Tedros together just start torturing him, and eventually they just leave him there like that to rot. And then eventually they set him free because he's got a bigger role to play in one of Tedros's like nefarious plans here, which we don't know yet. But anyway, that's kind of the whole first half is focusing on like the music side of things with the, of course, like, you know, fucking sexually singing it. Like he's got a finger in her butt like a Naruto 1,000 Years of Pain while she's singing in order to get better moans on the track. But it turns out like even Jocelyn's manager thinks the music is pretty good, apparently. but not worth like the torture that she's being put through for it. But Jocelyn doesn't recognize it as torture. She's recognizing it as like love and all of that. Eventually, they're celebrating. They throw a huge party, tons of cocaine, tons of drinking. And that's when the girl from the first episode and second episode that was Jocelyn's friend, her dance instructor, comes over. And one of Tedros's like cult members, her name is Chloe, reveals to Jocelyn that that girl that Jocelyn thought was her friend for a while is actually one of Tedros's like biggest fans. Like, I wouldn't say ex because Tedros doesn't date anyone. He fucks everything that's conscious. So they weren't like dating or anything, but she's like obsessed with Tedros. And Chloe lets her know that and reveals that that girl actually brought Jocelyn to Tedros's club in the first place because Tedros ordered her to. And now all the dots are starting to connect in Jocelyn's brain like, oh, I've been fucking manipulated here. Oh, Tedros has kind of been the puppet master of like this whole thing. Nothing happened by chance. This was all a planned play here. So you think there's going to be this eureka moment where she comes to all of this realization and everything. And that girl then approaches Jocelyn saying like, hey, the record company wants me to take over your song. You okay with that? Jocelyn's just like, go for it, I guess. And then Jocelyn, for her revenge, texts her ex to come fuck her. And that's how she gets back at Tedros. So Jocelyn's ex comes over during the party. Tedros immediately takes notice of that, so Tedros does another big line of cocaine and then takes like 50 shots and starts doing karate at her ex. And then Jocelyn comes up and says, you know, I don't know that guy, come fuck me. So then her and her ex go have sex as Tedros cries outside the bedroom door listening to it. And that's pretty much where the episode ends. That's episode 4. I feel like we got absolutely fucking nowhere in this episode. And it was actually pretty light on goofy, fun moments. It was actually just pretty uncomfortable boringness for the most part. So yeah, that's the pre-season finale here. Final episode drops on Sunday, and you bet your sweet bippy I'm going to be glued to it watching that. And I'm not expecting much at all. This has been a complete disaster of a show. It is actually just softcore porn and nothing else. There's no real substance here. And it's downright depraved pretty often. Like, a lot, really. Without having any kind of deeper message to it at all. It's just bad. Yeah, the show's just kind of bad. I wouldn't even say it's fun bad. It's just there are some moments of fun bad to it. But it doesn't salvage the show. It really doesn't. It's still an overall genuine waste of time. But I'm going to complete the journey anyway because I've already, done 4 episodes of this side quest here. So might as well finish it here. So yeah, just wanted to give a little update on it. That's about it. So yeah. Today the world gets a little bit brighter because the Idol is finally over. And boy howdy, I tell ya, the season finale is something special. An unbelievable disaster. This series is only 5 episodes long, but it delivers cringe that will last a lifetime. 5 episodes, and it feels like you get about as much story as reading 5 seconds of a Tumblr erotic fanfic. There is nothing of substance here, no message to be delivered, and the final episode is downright insulting. I think this season is up there with Game of Thrones Season 8 in terms of how much of a fucking catastrophe it is. The final episode here is an actual speedrun to just end the show as quickly as possible, because I guess the director Sam Levinson had already busted his nut and was just kind of done with the property. I'll dive into the meatballs of this spaghetti in just a moment with the finale here, but I just want to say, I am convinced now that my theory is correct. I believed that this whole show only existed because Sam Levinson is a sexual degenerate who made this show for his own pleasure, and the finale kind of confirms my hypothesis. The finale basically just ends abruptly without bothering to finish any plot lines or have a sensical conclusion whatsoever. Again, I'll get into it in a moment, but I honestly can't think of any other reason for this show's existence other than Sam Levinson having something to play the skin flute to. Like, there is nothing of value here, and legitimately everything in this show is sexual. There is not a single scene that goes by where Lily Rose Depp's character, Jocelyn, doesn't have her titties out. Even something as simple as going to the store looking for clothes has her with her ass cheeks clapping in the wind and nipple boobies just fucking flopping around, and then eventually getting raw dogged in the dressing room moaning for the entire store to hear. There is not a moment that goes by in this show that isn't just softcore pornography. It's baffling. It doesn't have a message. And it's not just Jocelyn, but she's the main character, and Sam uses her like just a portal to the honkers dimension. Even though she is actually an interesting character that could have had a really interesting story told about her, instead Sam just decided to focus on making the whole show just a countdown till her melons pop out. That's it. It is very much a show that seems to be only about the sex and nothing else, and also making The Weeknd a clown. I have a conspiracy theory that I think Sam Levinson secretly hates The Weeknd and convinced him to take this role just so people would make fun of him for it. So they wrote the goofiest, most over-the-top, embarrassing character ever, and Sam convinced The Weeknd that it was a good idea. Because I don't understand how he even signed up for this role. It is genuinely embarrassing. The Idol is one of those rare circumstances where it doesn't have a single fan. Pretty much everything ever will at least have a couple of people pumping their fists defending it from people that didn't like it, but not The Idol. The only group of people I've seen defending The Idol are actual porn-addicted coomers and not much else. And them ejaculating over the show, I wouldn't exactly call a great defense for the show being good. And that's really it. And I understand why, like, that's the only people stepping forward to go to bat for the show, because that's really all the show is. It really does kind of boil down to, well, looked like it was just softcore pornography after all, and there was no real story here. This is one of just the very exceptionally rare circumstances where pretty much everyone comes together to dislike the same thing equally. So I guess The Idol works in that regard. It's like a unifying moment for everyone on the planet to laugh at this fucking abomination. But now, let's get into the finale. So I've made a video going over pretty much everything up till this point, so I'm not just going to recap everything, but let's just look at the finale and all of the sins that it commits. It pretty much just changes everything and abandons every plot point that it's built up over the season. Not that there's very many of those to begin with, but they do like a 6 weeks into the future thing, and every single character is completely different now. Everything has changed, and they just kind of fill you in a little bit on what's happened, which I think is always such a lazy cop-out, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Between episodes 4 and 5, we saw that Jocelyn fucked her ex to get back at Tedros for manipulating her. That was her ultimate revenge, and Tedros was outside of her room drinking and crying, listening to her cheeks get clapped. So that's kind of where episode 4 wrapped up, and episode 5 picks up with him in like a coke-induced trance. He's basically just a fucking lobotomite wandering around, like short-circuiting because he's on so much coke and so goddamn loaded. But eventually he hatched a plan where Xander took a picture of Rob with one of Tedros's girls in the cult, and then posted a story that Rob had raped her. So episode 5 starts off with Jocelyn's best friend learning that Rob is being accused of rape because Xander framed Rob for Tedros. And Jocelyn figures this out and tries kicking Tedros out of the house. She's very mad. She keeps trying to get him out of the house because she's been manipulated and she's had a complete 180 on everything here. She's finally seeing the truth. So she wants him out. But she doesn't get mad at Xander, who legitimately did this. Like, while he was just a marionette on the strings for the puppet master Tedros to control, Xander still knew full well what the plan was. To get Rob, out of the picture here for Tedros, and accused him of rape, which cost him his entire career. And for some reason, Jocelyn doesn't care about Xander doing that. In fact, Jocelyn still makes Xander one of the headline opening acts for her, which is an interesting play from the chess master Jocelyn here. But episode 5 basically is a completely different person than the entire series has ever shown us, and it happens like that. Like, all of a sudden, they just wrote a totally different character and just put Jocelyn's name on it. Because now, all of a sudden, she's taken control. And she's kicking Tedros out, which is good. Like, it's about time. She's opened up to the scam and hates Tedros, getting Tedros out of there. But she's taking all of Tedros's extremely talented singers and putting them in her show. But then there's like this half the episode is spent with all of those singers performing, and it goes on for way too fucking long. They're performing in front of all the music industry executives, and they're like, "Oh, this is mind-blowing. I've never heard someone sing notes like that. Oh my god, the Lord has come down and blessed us for this performance. You're all hired. We're doing it big, baby." And that's like half the episode, so it drags on for so long. But during these performances, there's a scene where the older lady is talking to Tedros, and she's like, "I know Jocelyn didn't do this. This is you, Tedros, didn't you?" And she's like fucking slapping him awake because he's fading into the shadow realm from being so high. And he's like, "Yeah, no, this was me." And she's like, "Okay, well, you and I need to work together because this is real talent. You found them." And then actually 3 minutes later, she just fucking hates Tedros. She's like, "Yeah, he's such a fucking weird loser. Tedros sucks." And then helps to ruin his entire life because he is a bad guy. Eventually, once Jocelyn gives them the okay, they run a big piece exposing Tedros as like a former pimp who went to jail for a lot of heinous shit. And that lady who actually 3 minutes ago wanted to help Tedros and work with Tedros and not Jocelyn apparently was integral to helping that come to play. Why and how? This is what I'm saying. They set up these things in the episode too, and then just forget that it ever happened and pretend that it never did. Like, it doesn't follow any plot lines to its conclusion. It just leaves them and forgets. Another one. Jocelyn's best friend has been hyped up across the entire series as the only person seeing through Tedros' scam, seeing him for the evil person that he is. And in this episode, she's happy to see Jocelyn finally learning that too, but she still kind of gets left in the dust by Jocelyn, who doesn't really like communicate super well with her. And she just leaves, and she's never heard from again. Like, they don't even like address what happened. She just vanishes, and like out of nowhere. She leaves a note on Jocelyn's bed, and unless I've been like neuralized by the Men in Black, they never even show what the note was or even hint at what it could be. She just is gone. Like, actually just left this corporeal dimension out of nowhere without doing anything. So her entire existence in the show was meaningless. She did nothing by the end. Nothing that she did contributed to anything. It's actually just shocking. Like, me explaining this episode sounds like the ravings of a mad lunatic. But this is actually how the episode plays out. It is nonsensical, convoluted, messy, stinky, repulsive. Like, it's awful. Everything that could go wrong with a single finale went wrong with this one. It's an absolute disaster by all definitions. It just really feels like Sam was in his refractory period. Post-nut clarity, he's like, damn, I really didn't make a good show here. Let's just end it. Because originally, this show was pitched as 6 episodes. But then they like cut it down to 5, I guess, and then are trying to pretend like, no, that never happened. That's the Mandela effect. It's always been 5 episodes. And it's like, no shot. I just watched the finale, and there's no way you meant for it to be 5 episodes. Because it feels like an entire episode is missing. There is so much development that must have happened off screen in between these like fucking fever dream cuts of an episode. Like, there had to be something that explained it. Something that developed the characters there at some point, and it's not here. So they like loosely cut together something that resembled a plot, but not really. It's fucking terrible. You remember how I mentioned in like episode 2, or like where the backup dancer for Jocelyn was stabbing her in the back? The music industry executives were like, Jocelyn's backup dancer can sing and dance really well. Let's give her Jocelyn songs since Jocelyn's going through such a weird period in her life. And they were hyping that up like it was going to be the biggest plot point. Like, oh my god, she's now getting betrayed by people that she thought she could trust. And it turns out that lady's working with Tedros. What's going to come from this? Spoiler alert, fucking nothing. In this finale, they sit that girl down again and they say, hey, we changed our mind. You can't have Jocelyn's song anymore. And then they send her on her way. They just say, scram, get out of here. It's like actually a 1-minute scene, maybe 5 sentences, and that's it. They just wrote that entire thing out, and you never see that character again for the rest of the episode. It even had the gall to try and be deep for a moment, where Tedros gets pulled aside by Jocelyn's manager, and he's telling the story of Little Red Riding Hood, and they're doing like cuts to Jocelyn, like, she's Little Red Riding Hood. And he's like, do you know what happened to the big bad wolf? He got fucking gutted by the hunter, and I'm the hunter. And then he like tries to pay him off to get out of Jocelyn's life, which Tedros doesn't accept. So then they print the piece about how he's a pimp and a horrible person, which ruins his entire life, basically. And then Jocelyn goes to her tour 6 weeks later because they do a time jump, and she's wearing a red hood, thus going forward with the Little Red Riding Hood story that her manager told earlier. But it's so goofy and pretentious because that story had no bearing on anything. Like, it didn't actually make any sense in the context of the show. It tried so hard to be deep, and I can already just picture the think tank at the Idol HQ, the writing room, filled with cigar smoke and fucking soiled trousers from constantly ejaculating about the amount of sex that they're writing in the show. And they're like, we need something real profound, real deep. They hit another line. What about Little Red Riding Hood? Genius! Oh my god, Sam, genius! Print it, write it down, quick, quick! But it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense in the show at all. It falls so flat. It's like they really thought that this would be like a statement piece, like the Idol would be remembered for this Little Red Riding Hood moment. But all it was so laughably pathetic. So pathetic. But by far the biggest crime the finale commits is its last 10 minutes. The last 10 minutes have to be some of the worst in all of televised history. So basically, Tedros' career gets ruined, right? So everything gets shut down. They expose him for being a pimp and holding a woman hostage, going to prison for 6 years for awful crimes. And then Jocelyn's on tour. She's about to perform, and Tedros shows up at the ticket booth asking if he has any tickets, not really expecting much because Jocelyn, said, fuck you, get out of my life, I hate you, we're done. But he still decided just to try. And it turns out Jocelyn did leave him tickets. So Tedros takes the tickets, goes to see Jocelyn in the dressing room, and then she's, taken back control. Now she's the authority figure. And this is supposed to show the development how she's no longer like, a puppet or putty in the hands of Tedros. But it actually still feels like that's the same thing because she can't live without him, which she makes pretty clear. He is the love of her life. And she makes that very clear to him. So it seems like the power was still on Tedros' side, so they didn't even tell the story of Jocelyn getting out from a manipulative, abusive situation and getting out of a fucking cult. It had her going right back in the very end. And it even had a deplorable scene where Tedros picks up the hairbrush that Jocelyn talked about her mom abusing her with. There was a very, uncomfortable scene from like episode 3 where she opens up about how her mom used to abuse her in order to push her to make the best possible music, and Tedros is like, give me that hairbrush. And then he starts beating the shit out of her with the hairbrush to try and help her realize her potential. So Tedros is in the dressing room here in the finale. He sees that brush and he's like, this is the hairbrush your mom abused you with, right? And she says, yeah. And then he turns it over and he's like, but it's new. And then she just looks at him back in the mirror. I'm not even making that up. That's a real scene here. And then she goes on stage and all of the music execs are celebrating like Tedros is finally out of the picture. This awful person is finally gone. And Jocelyn goes on stage and says, Tedros, come out here. And then she just makes out with him in front of the entire stadium, who now knows that this guy is a pimp, like all kinds of horrible things about him, and calls him the love of her life and that he's hers forever, and then instructs him just to go watch backstage. I couldn't have envisioned a worse ending for this show. I mean that. It accomplishes nothing. It doesn't deliver any message at all. And in fact, the only semblance of a message that it does deliver is a very disgusting one. Jocelyn never breaks free from the mind control spell of Tedros. She is still under the complete control of the sexual shaman here, where she can't live without him. And he is still legitimately a horrible person who, from the very beginning, was manipulating her. And she still invites him openly back into her life to share the spotlight with her. It's just baffling. If they wanted to write it where it's like a complete flip, where Jocelyn's the one in control now, then they really missed the mark. Like, dreadfully. She did have a moment where, like, she is the authority figure and kicks Tedros out, but then they don't commit to it and just bring Tedros back. Like, and he hasn't changed. There is no development for Tedros. From the very beginning, he hasn't fucking changed at all as a character. It's so weird. And I haven't even covered all of it. This is probably only half of like the plot points that don't make any sense or the plot lines that they just forgot about or abandoned. It's just truly awful. The Idol is, without a doubt, one of the worst shows they've ever really made. And I know that's like a big claim to make, but I'm talking on a big budget scale. Of course, there's like, really low budget shit that just gets, vomited out on like a direct to DVD, season, or on some TV channel like CW pumps out awful seasons of shit all the time. But as far as big budget and like big name shows go, I think this is the worst. 5 episodes of nothing worthwhile at all. Nothing even remotely coming close to even resembling something of value. It's horrible. The only audience that could ever really appreciate it is just people that are there to watch porn, basically. That's it. That's the whole show. It's so bad. But yeah, I mean, I finished it. The season's over, which is nice. Now we don't have any more of the Idol, which is a good thing. I don't think they're getting a season 2. That's for damn sure. But yeah, anyway, just wanted to kind of just, for my own sanity, just rant and vent about what I just watched here. That's really about it. So yeah.